Hello everyone. Welcome to another session with us at Project Control Academy. This is part of our weekly value added content and interview with the experts that we do every week for you every Thursday at 11 a.m. US Central Time. So if you are here with us, thank you. I look forward to hearing your questions and learning more about the struggles you are facing, especially about the topic that you are about to explore. About today's topic, it's something that I'm sure most of you have been trying to incorporate into your projects, but perhaps you face some issues or challenges and you might have forget about it or ignored it altogether. So I'm talking about the resource and cost loading our schedules. Out of curiosity, how many of you are doing that at the moment in your projects? Do you resource or cost load your schedules? Please type in the chat. Do you do that? If not, why you are not doing it? Have you found it quite a challenge to incorporate the cost into your schedule? Does it worth adding this into your schedule, or it's just the time that it needs to get it done, perhaps not worth your time, or you don't have enough resources to get it done? What struggles you are facing with this at the moment? And the reason we are bringing this topic up, if you have been part of our weekly broadcast with other guests and industry experts that we had, they all, like at least two of them in the last few months, they referred to the importance of the cost and schedule integration. Like we had one senior project manager who said, I made every project to be resource and cost loaded. There is no way back. So he highly recommended doing that. Even last week, with another session we had with a technology provider on leveraging technology and leveraging the new technologies into our projects, the first step that he recommended as a starting point was cost and schedule loading. So resource loading our schedule as a starting point, so we have the data and benchmarks so we can forecast more accurately in our projects. But then that kind of hit us in the head whether or not we are really doing that basic step that help us move toward leveraging new technologies into our projects. Do you do that in your projects? So let me see if we have any comments here. So Tracy says, yes, both. That's fantastic. Good job, Tracy. So we have John here. Very good to see you, John. John says resource loading on big projects. Yeah, of course. But John, do you also maintain that resource loaded schedule? Are you just loading the resources and then that's it for the one time for the baseline? Or are you maintaining that resource loading schedule and cost loaded across this project execution? We also see here major challenges he faced on cost and resource loading is actually cost distribution throughout the project length. Yes, very good point. So we are going to address those here. So here we have another comment by Sana. I'm experiencing benchmarking. That's perfect that you are doing that. So yeah, have your comments coming up here, everyone. And yeah, okay, I hear from John that he's saying, yeah, maintaining resources. That's perfect. So you are doing the resource loading throughout your project lifecycle. So we also hear from MD that major issue I'm facing is planning. Very good point. Very good point. So now, today, we are going to tackle those hopefully by the end of this session, which is not going to be like our typical casual LinkedIn Live session. We're going to have slides and visuals so you get the point of how to tackle this. So, and I have an expert going to cover this, how to overcome the challenges with resource loading our schedules and how to make it easy and how he has done it in the projects and now helping other companies do that. So, without any further ado, I would like to invite Todd Taylor to come here on this virtual stage and share with us his strategies and wisdom on resource loading the schedule and how to make it easy. So, Todd, thank you so much for joining us in this
There.
session. I'm very glad that you came up with this idea and topic. Actually, Todd approached me after our last session and said, the presenter recommended this resource loading as a first step to our leveraging technology. I have a solution for that and I want to present that. So I'm very glad that you came forward with this idea, Todd, and we cannot wait to hear from you. But before diving into the content and sharing your ideas on this resource loading, the schedules, tell us a bit about yourself and what made you be passionate about this topic and what you're planning to cover in today's session.
Yeah, well, I come at this kind of from a different angle. Most people within project controls, of course, are more, working on the operational side. And my background essentially is IT, been in IT for like 20 years, but about 9 years ago, started work for Lane Christensen, and they were kind of in water management, drilling water wells and water treatment plants and so forth. So, anyways, that was my entree into really construction, and really got me fascinated. Built data warehouses, complete project reporting platform, and started down the path of earned value, and really starting to understand the importance of planning, and then collecting the data and so forth. Moved from Link Christensen to Strike, both located in the Woodlands area in kind of North Houston. And so for about 4 years was the construction technology manager, and focused on all the tools around, again, kind of planning, execution, closing, including rolling out Procore for PMIS, and then toward the end developing, again, kind of earned value management platform and reporting that was successful. Unfortunately, between the pandemic and some downturns at that time, Strike kind of downsized. So anyways, at that point, it was a good opportunity to kind of break out or branch out on my own. Started Performance Loop to really focus on just really helping construction companies kind of leverage these tools and integrate them. Because as many of you, probably realize, and is evident within your own organizations, that, there really isn't just one solution that does everything, from estimating to scheduling to tracking to, document management, drawing management, RFI submittals, et cetera, the whole job life cycle. So essentially it requires multiple systems to be integrated together to really pull this, to really realize the value of project controls. And so hence kind of what we focus on. And I love project controls. Even though, yes, we're Procore certified, understand the value of properly managing drawings and documents, specifications. Obviously, that's all critical to projects. But, back in my degrees as an engineer, so I like numbers, and hence passionate about project controls.
Fantastic. So now you just told us that you've been doing integration and helping companies to create that integration. So let us know how we can get started by integrating the cost and resources into our scheduling software. Is that really made easy? How we can do it really without any hassle?
Absolutely. So let me start. Let me share my screen here.
Sure. And while you're sharing the screen, we have Sana that she's saying this is difficult in intangible business operations, right? So Are you,
Say
do
that
you
again.
mean?
I'm sorry. Was that a question
Yeah,
or a comment?
so I'm not sure. That's more a comment that's kind of difficult in intangible business operations. So let's go through the presentation, Sandra, and then at the end we will go through your questions and perhaps the challenges. But definitely, yeah, this is not something that every one of us can tackle and can incorporate into our projects. But let's see what Todd has to share with us and whether or not we can start incorporating them. So the stage is yours, Todd. Let's get started on the conversation here.
Awesome. And Sheree, you mentioned, again, I attended last week, and Michael Pink from Smart PM, who's the CEO, again mentioned how few schedules, and that's what they primarily focus on, are resource and cost loaded. And so anyways, I felt almost like a college kid wanting to raise my hand saying, hey, well, we've done this before. And so anyways, want to walk you through, I guess, some of, what we've seen, some of the roadblocks and some approaches to overcome them. Having gone through and developed this whole kind of presentation, if you will, really looking at the, at the title, resource, loading the schedules with resources and costs made easy. Maybe it might have been better termed easier, because yes, it is challenging, but you can see we kind of ran out of space there. So we'll go with easy. But so first off, let's just look at what are the benefits to loading the schedules and resource. Kind of why put in the effort, right? And then really it kind of breaks down, or at least we feel it breaks down into kind of two areas. You've got non-technical kind of challenges, and then you have technical challenges, and we'll go through those. And then kind of coming up with a kind of formulating a winning game plan. And you'll see kind of despite where your role is within the organization, there's really ways that everyone can contribute to kind of moving this forward. So, on the benefit side, it breaks down into kind of, both owners and general contractors, subcontractors can both benefit. So on the, the owner side, what's in it for them is like kind of getting reassurance that, hey, the general contractor has a good handle on this project and has taken the time to thoroughly plan it. Obviously getting down to, all the resources required for every activity. And then obviously with a good schedule, it's, scheduled out with successors and predecessors and the logic and so forth. So anyways, it's that feeling of confidence. And then with that too, then cost curve projections, can be of value, especially, depending on the contract, right? Like cost plus, then it comes into play, and being able to schedule out those costs become important. And then site crew and equipment expectations. I've worked on some projects where, it was basically a requirement from the owner that they wanted to know essentially a plan is so exactly what equipment, and more importantly, the number of crew members that were going to be on site throughout the duration of the project. So, obviously these benefits are going to vary depending on your industry and where you sit and your clients or the owners, the customers. But anyways, these are some that we've experienced and we've seen. And then on the kind of the general contractor, subcontractor side, again, conversely, it demonstrates that, hey, their thought had been put into planning the project, and again, kind of builds confidence that this, exactly what it's going to take to get it done. Obviously, the cost curve projections are certainly always important to the contractor. And then another area that that doesn't seem to get as much press maybe as other areas, but obviously very important to HR and procurement, that they can come up with their plans to, of course, onboard, the required folks to do the project. But then too, with procurement, the more detailed the equipment and materials are kind of scheduled out, then they get an idea of, when those things need to be procured. And so for, really there, like two kind of major areas, like the high cost items, you don't want them sitting around too long from a cash flow standpoint. And then especially today, long lead items on many things. The more information you can give the procurement folks as to when that's going to be needed, they can work backwards and figure out when to order that. Reducing round trips to estimating. So we recently worked with a client that integrated Innate Estimate with Oracle Primavera Cloud, and one of their main objectives was just as they were kind of fine tuning the budget before day zero or go live, that they just wanted to be able to change durations and within the schedule, and if they're cost loaded, if the resources and the rates are loaded, essentially as soon as they do that, the cost adjusts. So they didn't have to go back and forth or back to the estimating system to get those cost updates, as well as scenarios too. As you all know, anybody using P6 and even Microsoft Project, pretty easy to run various scenarios. So, again, if they're resorted and race loaded, you can run those scenarios and not only get different durations, but the costs get associated with that too. And then, as Sheree kind of alluded to, this kind of sets up for really project control success, right? Because really, if you achieve this, you're kind of halfway there, because then you've got the plan, exactly kind of what activities, hopefully what included with that, the quantities, and essentially when they're going to be installed and at what rate and the costs that go with that. So you basically have your plan value. And so now it's just a matter of really tracking actual installed quantities and actual costs, and you essentially achieve earned value. One addition here too is I just attended an ACE local chapter up just south of Dallas, and last night, and talked to a gentleman, fellow member, and asked him, if they were cost and resource loading their schedules, and he said they had for about 2 years. They're a large civil contractor, and he said their main benefit was actually forecasting. And so by the project teams having that information, they could improve their forecasting. And then just real quick, the underlying kind of message here behind this is to leverage this information to build a business case. So, sometimes even though this seems like logical and good reasons, it always helps to, because these things always do take some time and effort, inevitably. So the better business case that you can essentially build for your manager, for the executive team that may be able to, may be asked to invest, time, resource, dollars into this. So for instance, collecting information around webinars that you see, like this or last week's, association papers from ACE or AACE and others that, or articles that you see, or peers. You talk to your peers at other organizations, if they're doing it, if so, what are the benefits, and just kind of documenting that so that you're prepared if anyone asks, why should we do this? You got some extra gear backing there. So kind of long-winded there, but an important aspect. So what are some of the again, kind of breaking it down into non-technical and technical challenges? I'm sure some of you out there have seen this. We certainly have. Siloed departments, right? That often these kind of functional areas are set up within their own kind of department. So you've got estimating, that are working on the estimates and the bidding process. Sometimes scheduling comes into that because it's required for the bid, but essentially, they'll be bidding ferociously to land one. And then once it's awarded, then it goes over to scheduling to actually schedule it out for the execution. Gets passed on to the project execution team, and then also to finance to kind of track it. But those tend to be departments. They tend to be kind of siloed, and they're focused on their own issues. So the other areas are essentially resource coding and WBS coding that need to be kind of standardized and aligned if this is ever going to flow through the process. And I'll touch on that. But so siloed departments, one way to break it down is even if you are, the actual at the estimating level or the scheduling level, just reaching out and building those relationships. It's huge. So I know we're supposed to be talking project controls. You're probably thinking, why am I talking lunch here? But it's just so important to, again, kind of, opportunities to reach out, connect with your peers within the other departments, on the project side, on the, within cross department building relationships. You can understand their issues. They can understand yours and brainstorm on how to, overcome these to basically achieve some of what we're talking about today. Another good one too is vendor conferences. If you all can go to vendor conferences, gets you out of the office. So one, you're kind of building that relationship, and then you're also getting input from, obviously a lot of those presentations, and typically they're on, how to improve processes, how to leverage systems, et cetera. So great way to do it. And then same with the associations, right? So AACE is a great one, focused on project controls. So, if in this case, obviously it covers all areas of project control. So perfect to get cross-functional team to all go and attend and work on kind of tackling these challenges together. Because it takes, and the reason I'm kind of elaborating on this is that you can have the greatest systems and, the coding structures I'm going to go over, but if you can't get everyone to kind of work together, it won't really work. So that obviously is key. So on the resource code side, really it just comes down to making sure that there's a structure in place. It essentially represents a unique code for the resource, but it just want to I guess kind of emphasize standardization, because when I was at my last company, each division had their own estimating department. Each estimating department came up with their own resource structure. And so that was fine on the estimating side. But then when we started to pushing that over into P6, every one of those resource with the unique IDs got created in P6. So, we had 6 to 8 of everything: project manager, superintendents, foremen. I mean, it was crazy. And so it was so bad, we had to essentially set up a new instance of P6 just to kind of clean it up. So anyways, real important to kind of come up with a strategy. Here's one that we've used, pretty simple, just like a 3-letter code to represent the type, 2 numeric digits for the class, and then the role. So it can work for labor. So you could have kind of RLS for resource, labor, salary, project manager or project team, and then the project manager. Another example to apply it to, like equipment, REO for resource equipment owned, 12 representing like excavators, and then, a specific model of excavator. So, just kind of an idea on how that could get laid out. And again, just need something standard and unique. So along the lines of WBS, same concept, but what's important here that we've found is that it kind of get broken out into what we used to integrate with JD Edwards a lot, and they really broke their kind of coding structure down into cost code and cost type. So I kind of refer to what's in the orange here as cost code. And that being essentially broken down into kind of phase, direct, indirect, risk, material, then discipline, and then activity. And having that kind of standardized across the organization so that it's applicable to, similar types of projects so that you can do benchmarking and compare. But it's also important that in the blue is kind of project specific. So not just the project number, but we found it very useful to include like sub-project segment so that, depending on the project, if it's pipeline, it could be spread, within pipeline, a lot of times one project will have different size pipe depending on if it's tying into an existing line, it's the main line, or even vertical construction. So maybe different floors or buildings can be broken out. Those aren't something that you're going to have standard typically across an organization. So it allows you to customize it and makes the project execution team happy, while at the same time at the lower level, you can kind of compare disciplines across projects and do some benchmarking there. So, just an example here would be like, you got a project number for like Dallas Methodist, maybe expansion, sub-project or segment could be building 1, floor 2. And then you get into kind of the standardized cost code, which would be like facility, mechanical, and then within mechanical, you got HVAC, hanging ducts. And so, within having the like 3 segments of 2 digits, you get like 100,000 basically combinations, theoretical combinations. So typically it handles most any of the implementations that we've done. So now on the technical challenges. So once you kind of, you get the groups working together, you come up with your coding structure. Now it's just, focused on, okay, how do we move that from the estimating system into the scheduling system? So couple approaches. So with it, and our experience is mostly with an estimate, but I have been exposed or worked with like B2W and their system, and most other systems have similar kind of functionality, not exact, but similar. So I think these same approaches still apply. So first is, looking at, well, what's built in, right? So within an estimate with P6, they have a very robust, essentially integration option or configuration already built in that can go from an 8 estimate, which was typically kind of on premise, to P6 that's on premise. So it's really just a matter of configuring those options, which can include resources and costs. And essentially, once the systems are kind of configured and connected, from a user standpoint, it's literally just kind of determining what activities you want to push over and clicking that button. About the only thing that a little bit of a shortcoming with that is just they don't allow for the WBS to automatically be pushed over. So you do have to kind of copy and paste the WBS into the activity column, which is what's pushed over to P6, but certainly doable. So better than necessarily trying to program the whole thing from scratch. So one option there. The other is that it's not available. A lot of these systems will allow you to kind of configure the layout of the tabs. So kind of like Excel, I've got a picture here, a screenshot of like the resources. And essentially, you can, first of all, determine which columns are essentially, are configured or displayed. and then put them in the order that you want, and you can export that out to Excel. And typically there's some kind of Excel import on the other side. So it might take a couple of steps, like you need to do resources and then the actual CBS to bring everything in, but one possibility. So in this case, yes, it was essentially 3 steps: the resources, the WBS, and then you would bring in the CBS to essentially complete that. And again, that could work for, it definitely works for Microsoft Project and could work for other systems as well. Then on the, when you kind of get beyond and going into a more elaborate integration, kind of the ultimate would be, a fully integrated system where you have more or less an integration hub that the estimate is essentially downloaded into, and then whatever's required output into the other systems, like scheduling, project execution, the financial system, depending on what they need. Because one quick note, what we find a lot is that the estimating, schedule, and the field management or execution systems are fairly flexible with like the WBS structure and resource coding. But a lot of times the ERP is a little more constringent, but that's okay. And that's where something like this would come in and pass what's required kind of to each system. But this does take kind of time, effort, and money. One quick thing is, one thing that's nice about this is once you, not only can it serve as a dissemination of the information to set up and configure all the other systems, but can collect the data back. So then you can implement monitoring and control and, basically generate all your project control types reports, EVM, and so forth. But what I'm kind of excited about to tell you, and this is where it's made easier, certainly, is and what we did for a recent client of ours is, they didn't want to invest that much, in a fully automated system at this point. They're rather small and starting up. So what we did, which is pretty darn effective, is, here's my little estimate, so Excel has the capability of being able to, through their data connection, connect directly to a database. So behind estimate is a SQL Server database. So with a little help from Nate, they gave us the schema and the tables to where to connect to. And then that allowed us to essentially create SQL to pull the data into the Excel spreadsheet in the exact template. So in their case, they're using Oracle Primavera Cloud, and for their scheduling and risk and and other aspects of that program. One of the nice things about OPC is that it's got a lot built in. But anyways, we're able to pre-populate the import template that essentially is exported out or included with that system. So it pulls the data, you basically hit refresh, you upload it, and you've got it. So once you kind of set that up, it's super easy. And the same can be said for Microsoft Project. So Microsoft Project's a little bit different. It doesn't really have the import templates. It allows you to actually map whatever Excel kind of template you have to import the resource, cost, and activities. So, but essentially the same concept can apply. And in comparison to that kind of full integration, this is probably about 10% of the effort of doing a full integration. So it can get you a long way with with a fraction of the effort involved. So kind of formulating that winning business game plan. So again, kind of recommendations: build that business case. Collect that data. especially as this goes up the ladder, more and more it's home when you can say, hey, your fellow competitors are doing this, or the top companies in the industry are doing this, or top organizations all recommend in this case resource and cost loading schedules. It helps build the case, and then you can start diving into, okay, well, what's it going to take to get it done, right? Work to address those non-technical challenges. So again, building those bridges, building those relationships, and making it a team effort can go a long way. Identify those technical challenges. So again, we typically recommend, or we work backwards. So what's the scheduling system you're working with? What does it require? And then kind of back up to, well, what's available within the estimating system? What does it look like? What can it output? And so forth, to try to figure out, okay, how do we bridge that gap? And again, too, leverage, reach out for solutions. So, and not just internally, but I mean, through the associations, they have boards, forums that you can put out questions. And I'm sure there's other people out there that are more than happy to share their experiences or solutions. I mean, some might want to keep it close to the vest, but there's many people out there that are more than happy to share. And even like LinkedIn, some of those, you can put out questions and join groups there as well, and get some great feedback on where to go. Also too, LinkedIn Learning, boy, is really great. Just a great resource for training. And that's where I've picked up some of the stuff on Microsoft Project and how to integrate resources and costs. They so much better than YouTube, because it's methodical and a complete course. So anyways, and then not to mention a plug for Project Control Academy. Obviously, they've got a number of great courses. In one, I just saw a recent masterclass on not just resources and cost, but full-blown EVM within P6. So a lot of good resources there. And then but one quick point: make sure and test whatever solution you come up with, to make sure that like the resource coding, the WBS coding that you come up with is going to work. A lot of times, at least within my old company, we had a test system that could be set up that you could run, all the tests that you wanted without worrying about messing anything up. It was completely separate instances. So look into that as you're kind of proving this out before you go live into production. And then organize a team for charter pilot. So it's getting that. There's always people that are very interested in moving the ball forward, right? So you find those project managers that are open to leveraging some of these advancements. Same within the different departments. And so anyways, you get a collective team together and pilot this out, and then kind of go from there. So that's all I had, Sheree.
Thank you very much, Todd, for this great presentation and giving us some insight on how we can do the integration. So we have some questions from the audience, which I'm going to go over in a moment. And I also have some questions for you that I would like to get clarity, because whenever it comes about integration and integrating costs into schedule, a lot of challenges come into play. But I really like the fact that you started by addressing some non-technical challenges, basically collaboration with the team and removing those silos, which we already got a good comment here by Arpan, that he's saying that, project management, project engineering, and project control management needs to create that collaboration and disconnect that we have like between silos. And I agree totally with him that that needs to come from the top management. But as you mentioned, Todd, we can also have our part in there by starting to create that relationship with other stakeholders and hopefully bridging the gap between different separate silos that we usually deal with. Any other thoughts on bridging the gap between different separate silos so that we can, as a starting point for integration? So that's about it, I guess, right?
I'm saying that again. Sorry.
Yeah. So is there any other thoughts that you have that help you in bridging the gap between different silos, like from cost estimating to scheduling, and even within project control, separate silos that we have, to as a starting point for bridging the gap and creating that integration?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I just go back to kind of my experience there, and some of the um, most significant relationship building was really done at those conferences. Like we went out to the Procore conference, and that's where I kind of connected with a colleague of mine, Paratosh, and he was on the operations under project controls, and I was over in IT, and he was fairly new, and we hadn't crossed paths that much, but at that conference, we really connected, and then really start talking about the challenges and then how we could both address them. So we both went back with kind of a plan, and then and it was great because then he would pull me in, I would pull him in, and he would pull me in. So when a project manager would go to go to him directly, he would loop me in on the conference call. So then I would get it more involved with the project management teams, and then vice versa. As we were talking about technical subjects, pull him in to make sure that when we did implement systems and configure them, they were dialed in and more successful when we rolled them out.
And Todd, you mentioned about the importance of having the standardization, especially with the coding structure, with the resource and WBS coding, which I totally agree, which basically echoed what Mike from Smart PM mentioned in the previous session we had, like even leveraging AI and machine learning start with standardization. So, which I'm glad that you refer to. Without that, we cannot really create that integration. But when it comes to integrating, like with, as you mentioned, we have finance, we have ERP system, we have cost estimate, which each one of them has their own structure and not necessarily aligned with the WBS, which is the main structure for the project. So how do you overcome that challenge, and how do you align different platforms and different project deliverables? Let's say, especially, for example, cost estimating. Always the cost estimators have their own structure, their own coding structure that is not aligned with the WBS. The finance has their own structure that is not aligned. So, as a starting point, how do you bridge the gap to bring everything together in that integration hub that you mentioned to create that integration? Is it starting from the standard breakdown structures, or no? There's a workaround around it.
So yeah, I mean, we typically kind of revolve everything around the WBS, and you're right. Usually the estimating teams kind of have their structure, but once a project's awarded, we used to have what we called conforming the estimate. So if it didn't kind of break out into the WBS, that they kind of rolled things up, we would break it down so that it's essentially it would broken down by the WBS, so we could pass it over to the schedule. And so that's where too, making sure that the estimating teams understand the full capability of the system really helps, right? Like, so for instance, a lot of times the pushback is, hey, well, we don't have time to break it all out by the WBS. That's scheduling or execution's problem, and we're moving on to the next bid. And I get it; they've got to bid a lot, and they're under a lot of pressure. But there's also things too that make it easy. I mean, it's not that hard. Once you have an activity, if you've got it all rolled up for, let's say, all 10 floors, and you want it broken out by floor, you literally can just copy and paste it down. So within, a couple of minutes, I could break out an estimate, that had it all rolled up under just one building into 10 floors. And then too, there's other things, there's productivity factors within it too. So then it allows you saying, look, it's going to cost us, a little bit more to really construct everything on the 10th floor than maybe the first floor. So, you can apply without having to adjust rates or anything, just apply that productivity factor. And now you just tweak your cost to get it in line with what you're looking for. So there's ways that you can do this to, leverage the functionality to speed this whole process up. So, that's where it's breaking down those barriers. And if you have the relationship, it's like, hey, can we try this? If it's an adversarial relationship, no, it's not going to work, but if you're friends, okay, let's try it. Let's see if we can make it work. And then, hey, it's not as bad as I thought, And so from our standpoint, from a construction management, I mean, that was really our responsibility, was to make sure that they understood the functionality and could leverage it. So that's what got us over the hump to get them to actually start leveraging. The other, just real quick, the other aspect that we ran into a lot is with estimating is that, most of those systems are based on, kind of almost like a WBS, right? Where you got your different activities and the resources get loaded underneath it, but not necessarily in the same view. And a lot of them like to break down it such that the resource almost looks like an activity. So, you'll have, in that example of hanging duct, but then underneath that, it would be like the material and then the labor. And it's like, well, those aren't activities. Those are resources. They should be underneath, but they want to be able to view them. But, case in point, it's like, well, hey, did you know you can just add columns that are the labor and the, and the materials and so forth. So there's other ways you can use the system as it was designed that helps the integration and get over that hump.
Thank you. And we have a good comment by John on how he tackles that. Actually, he used an individual activity code for each system and add all codes to the activity. Then he can see the schedule based on whatever structure that he wants to see. That's great. Thank you for sharing, John. So before going
real quick, sure. Just
yes.
to add, one thing I didn't mention is I kind of just showed you what we typically use. There are coding structures out there from AACE and others that, and if the standard out in the industry work for you, awesome, you use them, but the key though is to make sure that they're understood, they make the logical sense to the crew, the project teams and the crews, because ultimately they're the ones that have to select it and tell you the progress they're making against them. So if they're too convoluted,
exactly. And we see a good comment here by Paritosh that he also make the CBS, cost breakdown structure, separate from WBS structure. And I kudos to you for doing that, because usually people are mixing up these two together. WBS should be for your scope of work, and cost breakdown structure is how you structure your costs. So having these two not combined together somehow, not confused by the team, really helps. And any thoughts on that? I know the WBS structure you shared, you said the first part is project specific, Todd, and then also you incorporated the company specific WBS, which might also have some CBS structure into that as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, by default, like the estimating system starts with the CBS tab where you're building out the entire estimate. So by nature, it creates its own structure. But like with estimate, it's just a numeric automated numbering scheme just to keep it organized. But it's really not a structure. I mean, it is, but it's on a per estimate basis. It's not standard across anything. So, and that's fine, so leverage that, build out your estimate. But again, when it's time to really leverage that estimate to start executing against, that's where you can bring in the WBS, which is housed and configured separately, at least with an estimate, that then you can apply and start breaking it down so that it makes sense and you get those costs adding up by the activities.
And Todd, you also mentioned about the semi-integration that you have implemented by the cloud integration, like with the estimate, the in-house estimate system, P6 and Excel and the cloud. Can you shed more light on the cloud integration? Can everyone, I know your background is IT, but anyone in project controls can leverage the cloud integration?
Yeah, well, that's what the beauty of those templates are, is that like Oracle Primavera Cloud allows you to download that Excel template, and literally, if you can just populate that template, then you can essentially upload it, even though it's in the cloud. Now, yeah, most cloud systems will have also, and I didn't even really touch on it much or at all, APIs, application programming interfaces, that are the ultimate integration solution. So it's all done behind the scenes, and you don't have to worry about it. But this is a great first step. And even if that was the ultimate goal, was to leverage full integration, we would still work through those import templates just to see how it works and how the data winds up in the system before you then start trying to program it behind the scenes, in a direct integration. So that's the beauty. And with those templates, yeah, you can always copy and paste, like I said, but that kind of middle ground of, with just a little bit of effort, of being able to connect to like the back end database of some of those systems and pulling the data, as you need it correctly. Because when you copy and paste, if you do it wrong, it's going to mess it up, right? But if you can do that integration, like in our case, where I had the code of the project code number, subcontract, or subproject, and then the cost code or whatever, that needed to be concatenated together for OPC. So by doing that little database, that was very simple to do with a SQL statement to pull that data, and now it's consistent. And once it's set up, those guys just need to refresh it, select the project, and then refresh the data, pulls it in, and then they can upload it. And it's actually even kind of nice, right? That instead of just hitting a button and all of a sudden it's like opening up in your schedule, sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, what did I do? Now you have an intermediary. You have a way to actually look at it in the template, review it. Is this exactly what I want to upload, before you actually hit that button and upload it into your schedule? So there's some benefits to that too.
Okay, great. And how about the Primavera Cloud? So does the integration of the costs and resources is different in Primavera Cloud as compared to traditional P6 we've been using?
Yeah, very, very similar in that you're just bringing over the resources and the rates, and in both, it allows you to override the rates within the activities of a particular schedule. Probably the main difference is within OPC now they have the concept of workspaces versus the what is the EPS, the enterprise project structure. Those are nuances, but it is nice that you can actually, before, kind of that master resource library was just one within P6, and that's where I told you we ran into problems because everyone loaded into that, and we had 10 versions of everything. Whereas now it's broken out by the concept of workspace, and they really thought through it from the standpoint that, hey, if you want to just load it into a workspace that's a division or a geographical area, you could do that, or you can load it at like a corporate level, and it kind of flows down to everything. So they've put a lot of thought into that program. And just side note, really impressed with, they've built in kind of schedule validations, running through the different checks and the health of the schedule, and and risk. Risk is a big area that used to be a plug-in or whatever, and now it's kind of built in. So those are some of the reasons that at least our client went with OPC versus P6, at least, because it was kind of a new setup, so they had the opportunity.
Fantastic. So now we talk about the integration of the cost and schedule. And different ways of doing that. But one of the challenges is the distribution. Let's say you're loading the cost or resources into the schedule, but now the question is how to distribute that. And that the question here we have that question by Varun that, okay, now how do I distribute the cost for, let's say, engineering and especially procurement? Procurement is always a challenge. So any thoughts or insight on the distribution of the cost of resources when you load that into the schedule?
Well, I mean, if it's broken down, if it's a bottom-up estimate, and it's done by activity, it will naturally distribute the cost, because as soon as you set that activity and you do duration, and then it's smart enough to look at all those overlaps or whatever, and essentially you're going to get a nice S curve on it if you have enough detail. Now, materials is a good one, and that comes up a lot, and especially when you get into EVM, which is a little beyond our scope today, but you got choices there. So you can build the material into the quantity or the units for that activity, and it will get rolled in. And then or you can break it out and kind of filter it out. But so one quick point though, it is a good question. And what we did with this client is we broke out the materials from the duration driven, like equipment and labor, so that we could bring those in as units per time on the duration driven. So as you expanded you change your durations, it would automatically adjust the cost. But we would do fixed on the materials, because the materials aren't going to change based on the duration, basically. So there was a little bit of thought that went into that to only adjust the costs that are appropriate, essentially. But all very doable, and that's what's great. You got total control on the estimating side, and it parallels real well over to the scheduling side. But the only big, I guess, kind of gap that we see is, it's funny that quantities to kind of the scheduling side is more along the lines of hours and so forth than kind of units and unit of measure. So we actually had to bring in the units and unit of measure for the activities into a user-defined field. But at least it allowed us to import it in.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So we have another question around that procurement as well. So by Paritosh. So I think that's a comment to
He's just testing you.
So I think that's a comment for procurement. Basically, it's more tricky. So thank you for sharing that, Paritosh. Let me see if we have any other question here. Okay, so for the resource distribution, we get this comment that you can get the resource distribution curve to the cost. I agree with you, Paritosh, but even coming up with the right resource distribution curve might be tricky. What has been your thoughts or your, what are your insights, Todd, on using the resource curves for the distribution of the resources that are loaded into the schedule?
If in general, leverage what works.
But again, it depends. Like, let's say if you have a front-loaded curve for something that is not, then it just skew your distribution. So is there any best practices in regards to the way that you're distributing the resources in your schedule?
Again, we just brought it in so it was linear, essentially.
Oh, so linear. So you basically linearly distribute the resources across.
Yeah, across the activities.
Do you load them activity by activity, or at the level of effort, or kind of a summary level?
No, at the activity level. So that's why if the activities are short enough in duration, you don't have month-long activity. You're breaking them down, that you kind of get that distribution, by just natural. Now, I get it that there may be a little derivation there, but law of averages, again, if it's broken down, detailed enough, you kind of get. That's why I always kind of laughed, like with earned value. You would look at some systems and they're saying, oh, you can apply all these different kind of curves, and it's like, when we did it, we got our S curve. We didn't have to apply any kind of algorithm to it. It was kind of natural. You had fewer activities in the beginning and the end of the project, and meat of everything going on in the middle, and it kind of naturally gave you that planned value curve.
Yeah, I agree. If you load by activity level, that's the most accurate way of doing that. But sometimes you're dealing with thousands of line items in the schedule that make it impossible to do that line by line. So sometimes it's better to add it at a WBS level or at a higher level. In that case, yes, the distribution curve makes sense. And the way I was doing that, like looking at the distribution of the activities below that summary bar, and then according to that, then choose the right distribution curve. But again, it's always a tricky and it's your judgment call based on my own experience. I don't know about others how they have experienced that. So
yeah, well, and that's where we're trying to really work with the estimating teams, so that like you have templates and stuff. So every new project, you don't have to like go through and add every resource under every activity. After a while, you have certain, at least in my experience, certain labor, certain equipment, and so forth that does different activities. So if you're leveraging templates and so forth, within the estimating side, it speeds that up, and then it's automatically available to push over to the estimate. So you don't have to. It's already brought over, so you've got all that information.
Okay, we get a comment here by William that the cost curve is very different than the resource cost. For the resource cost is not the problem, but when you add material and equipment cost, that's based on the cash flow. Any thoughts on that, Todd?
So what's this question?
That's basically a comment regarding the resource curve basis versus the cost curve, kind of separating those out.
I mean, in general, from my perspective, it's obviously the resource curve. It's going to, because the resources have rates. It's going to be related to the cost, and if you disseminate the materials across it, there's a correlation there. Again, I guess I have to. Clarify that, again, I'm more from the IT side. We're really trying to just make sure that leverage the functionality of the systems and the integration, so the data is there for everyone in the audience to do what they need to do. I'm not an expert on when to use certain curves versus reports versus others. I mean, I wish I had more experience on, actually being a scheduler, and a project manager, and not necessarily always stuck on the IT side of the fence, but that's kind of, where my experience comes from. And so I'm just trying to make it as easy as possible to move that data over so that it can be leveraged. And just like you said, instead of being hit with the fact that, hey, we don't have time to load 1,000 line items or whatever, so we're just going to put it at some kind of summary level, and you lose all the granularity of it. Bringing that detail over in a fashion that now gives you that kind of detail. So, at that point, still a judgment call needs to be made as to how best to leverage that data and what to use, that best helps the project.
Exactly. So that sums up all the questions we have received from the audience. If you have any more, please have them coming. And if any of you is interested in exploring this more or kind of integrate, as Todd mentioned, EVM into P6, we have a training on that, specifically on how to integrate earned value management inside your scheduling software. So if anyone is interested, go and check that out if you want to take that further. But hopefully this session gave you some insights on really how you can make this easier in terms of the integration of the cost and schedule, and hopefully you can kickstart that on every project that you are doing. That's a message we are hearing every time that we have a discussion around this topic, and that's an advice by the SME. So special thanks to you, Todd, for shedding more light on that and sharing your experience on the integration of the cost and schedule. Let me see if there is any final questions. Yeah, there are more questions here. I'm not sure if we have time to go over them. We have a question by Javier. So I think we can cover them offline. I don't want to keep everyone holding more than an hour. So Todd will have access to the link for the recording, and he can come here and respond to your questions if there was any question that we didn't have time to respond. And I also saw some comments or questions regarding the recording. Yeah, our LinkedIn live sessions, which are also broadcasting on YouTube and Facebook as well for Project Control Academy, are available. You can check this out on LinkedIn, or you can go to the YouTube channel, just search Project Control Academy on YouTube, and you can locate all this live streaming that we had on a weekly basis. So, with that, do you have any final comments or any final wisdom that you would like to share, Todd, before we adjourn the session?
Um, mm, not not
Okay.
particularly, other than keep don't sometimes it can be challenging, and it is an iterative process. I just it, I guess it's kind of a correlation, but I just remember seeing one time when Elon Musk and SpaceX were testing their rockets, and they were trying to bring a rocket down and have it flip and land, and the whole thing blew up. And I just immediately thought, oh my gosh, anybody that was on that project team is probably, out the door. And he came out and tweeted and said, yeah, well, we're experimenting. If that was NASA, it would be a year-long investigation, and so forth. He's just like, yeah, we kind of expected it. We'll get it next time. So, not that you want to roll something out and have a project crash, but that's why I was talking about testing, and it is an iterative process. I mean, there's going to be certain aspects where you're like, yeah, that didn't work very good, but that's it. If you never try it, you're never going to get that rocket to flip. So it's like there's just in today's age, the systems are very capable, and we got plenty of ways to integrate the data. I mean, so
That's
the
a good
fact that
point.
only whatever that percentage is, that small 10% or whatever of the schedules and estimates being integrated, is we can improve upon that. There's
And
just
even there has been a lot of advancement in the tool providers. I mean, you brought an example of In8. I know they are very much into integration and even having their tool as one integrated hotspot for doing the integration for other things. Like whenever we talk with any tool provider, integration is the top of their game, and that's what they always look for. Yeah, it might not be integrated properly with other systems within our organization, but as you said, Todd, we have to tap into our existing systems and existing tools, which are now more capable as compared to when I used to use those tools in our projects. So there are a lot we just need to, as you said, practice and get better at that. But the whole point of this session was to encourage everyone to really take this more seriously. If you are not doing resource loading in your projects, take that into account. And yeah, it might be a struggle or challenge at the beginning, but you don't know how to do it unless you do it. So hopefully this session kind of inspired you to kickstart that if you're not doing that. And if you are doing that, then good job. So keep it up. So, with that, I think I don't have anything else to share. Next week, we are coming back with another session, with again with another insightful topic with an expert. And if you have any suggestion or any topic that you would like us to discuss in our weekly gathering, please share that in the comment down below every session that we have. So we make sure that we tailor this according to your requirements. Again, we do that on a weekly basis, and it's too much commitment and too much time that we spend every week for adding value to you. So I hope these sessions are adding value to you. And again, if you want that to be tailored according to your needs, let us know so we make sure that the sessions that we are scheduling are the topics that you're more interested in. So, with that, thank you to you, Todd, for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and keep up the great work by helping organizations to create that integration better. And thank you so much for coming up with this great topic. We appreciate you, Todd.
well, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. See you next week. Bye for now.